This story was submitted by someone we'll call Sarah, who was a sophomore at a large state university. Sarah had requested a single room, but was assigned a roommate due to housing shortages. The university's housing system randomly paired students based on basic compatibility surveys. Sarah's roommate, whom we'll call Michelle, seemed normal during their initial meeting. Michelle was quiet, but friendly, and her side of the room was meticulously organized. Sarah appreciated having a clean roommate and looked forward to a peaceful living arrangement. During the first few weeks, Michelle's behavior was unremarkable. She kept regular hours, was respectful of shared spaces, and seemed focused on her studies. However, Sarah began noticing small things that made her uncomfortable. Michelle would stare at Sarah while she slept, and Sarah often woke to find Michelle sitting at her desk in the dark, just watching. When Sarah asked Michelle about the staring, Michelle claimed she had insomnia and found watching people sleep calming. Sarah found this explanation disturbing, but didn't want to cause conflict early in their living arrangement. She decided to give Michelle the benefit of the doubt and hoped the behavior would stop. Michelle's behavior escalated gradually. She began going through Sarah's belongings when Sarah was in class, rearranging items and reading personal documents. Sarah discovered this when she found her diary pages folded differently and her desk drawers reorganized in Michelle's particular style. When Sarah confronted Michelle about invading her privacy, Michelle became defensive and claimed she was just cleaning their shared space. Michelle's response was aggressive and disproportionate to Sarah's polite inquiry, revealing an unstable temperament that Sarah hadn't seen before. Michelle began leaving disturbing notes on Sarah's desk, describing violent fantasies and expressing obsessive thoughts about their roommate relationship. The notes contained detailed descriptions of harm Michelle wanted to inflict on other students, particularly those she perceived as threats to her connection with Sarah. Sarah realized Michelle was developing an unhealthy fixation on their living arrangement. Michelle began demanding that Sarah spend all her free time in their room and became angry when Sarah socialized with other students. Michelle interpreted normal college social behavior as betrayal of their roommate bond. The situation reached a crisis point when Sarah discovered Michelle had been collecting Sarah's hair, nail clippings, and personal items in a box under her bed. Michelle had also been taking photographs of Sarah while she slept and had created a disturbing shrine-like arrangement of Sarah's possessions mixed with her own belongings. When Sarah attempted to move out, Michelle threatened self-harm and violence against other students. Michelle claimed that Sarah was abandoning her and that she couldn't survive without their roommate connection. Michelle's threats were specific and included detailed plans for harming people Sarah cared about. Sarah reported Michelle's behavior to residence hall staff, but the university's response was inadequate. Housing officials suggested mediation and conflict resolution rather than immediate room reassignment. They treated Michelle's behavior as a personality conflict rather than recognizing signs of dangerous mental instability. Michelle's behavior continued escalating despite Sarah's complaints. Michelle began following Sarah around campus, disrupting her classes, and contacting Sarah's friends and family with false information designed to isolate Sarah from her support network. The situation was resolved only when Michelle was arrested for assaulting another student she perceived as competing for Sarah's attention. The assault was unprovoked and violent, requiring hospitalization for the victim. Michelle's arrest revealed a history of similar incidents at her previous school that the university had not discovered during the application process. Sarah learned that Michelle had been transferred between multiple universities due to behavioral problems, but information about these incidents had not been shared between institutions. Michelle had been diagnosed with several serious mental health conditions, but had not been receiving proper treatment while living in the dormitory. The investigation revealed that university housing systems often lack adequate screening processes for identifying students who may pose dangers to roommates. Mental health information is considered private, which can prevent housing officials from making informed decisions about room assignments. Sarah eventually transferred to a different university, unable to feel safe on the original campus. The experience taught her that universities often prioritize student privacy and institutional liability over individual safety when dealing with potentially dangerous roommate situations. This account comes from someone we'll call Alex, a junior living in a co-ed dormitory at a private university. Alex was an experienced residence hall resident who knew most of the other students in the building and felt comfortable with the dormitory's security systems. The problems began when Alex started noticing that someone was systematically observing the daily routines of female students in the building. Alex first became aware of this when friends mentioned feeling watched and finding evidence that someone had been going through their belongings in shared spaces, like laundry rooms and study areas. The stalker was taking advantage of the dormitory's design and security vulnerabilities. The building had multiple common areas, shared facilities, and blind spots where someone could observe residents without being detected. The electronic keycard system tracked entry and exit, but didn't monitor movement within the building. Alex discovered the stalker was a male student living on the same floor who had been using his legitimate access to common areas to gather information about female residents. He was studying their schedules, following them to classes, and using shared facilities to get close to his targets without raising suspicion. The stalker had developed sophisticated methods for avoiding detection. He would position himself in study lounges and common areas during times when his targets were likely to pass through. He used the building's layout to observe women entering and leaving their rooms without appearing to be watching. Most disturbing was how the stalker was using information gathered from dormitory life to escalate his harassment outside the building. He would show up at his target's classes, workplaces, and social activities, claiming the encounters were coincidental since they lived in the same building. Alex reported the stalking behavior to residence hall staff, but the university's response was hampered by the fact that the stalker was a legitimate resident with authorized access to all the spaces where the harassment was occurring. Housing officials struggled to address behavior that was technically within the stalker's rights as a resident. The stalker escalated to breaking into individual rooms using techniques he had observed or learned from maintenance staff. He would enter women's rooms when they were away, go through personal belongings, and sometimes leave evidence of his presence to psychologically intimidate his targets. Several women reported that their belongings had been moved, that photos had been taken from their rooms, and that personal items had been stolen. The stalker was building a collection of trophies from multiple victims while using his residence in the building to maintain plausible deniability. The situation reached a breaking point when the stalker assaulted one of his targets in a dormitory stairwell late at night. The victim managed to escape and call for help, but the assault demonstrated how the stalker had been escalating toward physical violence while using the dormitory environment to access victims. The investigation revealed that the stalker had been reported by residents at his previous dormitory, but had been allowed to transfer to Alex's building rather than being removed from campus housing entirely. The university had treated the previous incidents as isolated conflicts rather than recognizing a pattern of predatory behavior. Alex learned that dormitory security systems are often designed to control access from outside the building, but provide limited protection from threats that originate from within the residential community. Students living in the building had legitimate access that could be exploited for harassment and stalking. The stalker was eventually expelled and criminally charged, but several students transferred to different schools because they no longer felt safe on campus. The incident revealed how universities sometimes fail to share information about problem students between different residential facilities. Alex transferred to off-campus housing and learned to be more cautious about sharing personal information with other residents. The experience taught Alex that dormitory community trust can be exploited by individuals who understand how to manipulate residential social dynamics. The final story comes from someone we'll call Jordan, a freshman living in a dormitory that was considered one of the safest on campus. The building was relatively new, had electronic security systems, and was staffed by residence hall advisors around the clock. The incident occurred during a weekend when most students had gone home, leaving the building largely empty. Jordan had remained on campus to work on academic projects and was one of only a few dozen students still in the building during what was normally a busy residential period. Jordan first became aware of a problem when the building's electronic entry system began malfunctioning. Students were having difficulty accessing the building with their keycards, and several residents reported that external doors were being propped open by unknown individuals claiming to be maintenance workers. The building's security cameras showed several men entering the dormitory who were not students, staff, or authorized maintenance personnel. These individuals appeared to be systematically moving through the building during hours when most students were away or asleep. Jordan discovered that the intruders were targeting rooms of students who were known to be away for the weekend. They were using information gathered from social media posts and conversations overheard in common areas to identify empty rooms for burglary. The intruders had been studying the building's security systems and had found ways to bypass electronic locks and surveillance cameras. They understood the building's layout, knew which areas were not monitored, and had identified vulnerabilities in the residence hall staff's patrol routines. Most disturbing was that the intruders had been planning their operation for weeks, gathering intelligence about student schedules and building security procedures. They had posed as prospective students, delivery personnel, and maintenance workers to study the dormitory environment without raising suspicion. Jordan encountered one of the intruders while returning to the building late at night. The man claimed to be a maintenance worker responding to an emergency repair call, but Jordan noticed he was carrying items that appeared to belong to other students, rather than maintenance tools. When Jordan questioned the man's presence in the building, he became aggressive and demanded that Jordan provide access to additional floors and rooms. The intruder claimed he had authorization from university officials and threatened to report Jordan for interfering with official business. Jordan managed to contact campus security while the intruder was distracted, but the response was delayed because weekend staffing was reduced. By the time security officers arrived, the intruders had fled the building with stolen property from multiple student rooms. The investigation revealed that the burglary ring had been targeting multiple dormitories across several universities in the area. They specialized in exploiting security vulnerabilities during periods when buildings had reduced occupancy and limited staff supervision. The intruders had been studying university social media accounts and student organization websites to identify when large numbers of students would be away from campus. They timed their operations to coincide with holidays, breaks, and major off-campus events. Most troubling was the discovery that the intruders had been receiving inside information from individuals connected to the university. Someone with knowledge of building security systems and student schedules had been providing detailed intelligence to facilitate the burglaries. Jordan learned that dormitory security systems are often designed for normal occupancy periods and become vulnerable when student populations are reduced. The combination of fewer witnesses, limited staff oversight, and predictable absence patterns creates opportunities for criminal activity. The burglary ring was eventually broken up, but several students lost valuable personal items and important academic materials. Jordan's experience revealed how universities sometimes fail to adapt security measures to account for periods of reduced dormitory occupancy. Jordan developed much more cautious attitudes about campus security and learned to be suspicious of unauthorized individuals in residential buildings. The experience taught Jordan that university security systems can be systematically studied and exploited by criminals who understand institutional vulnerabilities.